All right. Matt, ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Awesome. We got a good group here. We're going to go ahead and get rolling as it is 4:30. So welcome, everybody. I'm Kirby Sneen, President of the Manufacturers Alliance, your host this afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our online seminar on process improvement with Mac, facts, and data. This is the first of several online seminars that we're developing, of course, for member manufacturers. Really anyone that wants to become a better leader, better problem solver. We're going to put together more and more online content, especially over the next couple of months. So thank you, Matt, for kickstarting us in this effort. Before we get started, though, I do want to share a couple of things that I'm excited about and then just walk through our agenda. The first one is just to save the date. Like I said, this is the first of many online seminars, and so if you want to save the date, next Friday, we will be broadcasting live again. Our seminar is going to be entitled Leadership Standard Work, Strategies to Build Yours. And so that'll be Friday the 27th, again at 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. And this is going to be another complimentary event for anyone that's with a member company with the Manufacturers Alliance. I also wanted to take a moment here and just recognize those companies and the individuals that are representing those companies for joining us online, consequently taking full advantage of your Manufacturers Alliance membership. It was great to see the strong turnout as we literally put this together in a few days. And so thank you to Anderson Corporation, Bethany Press, Cantel Medical, Caribou Coffee, Design Ready Controls, Imagine Print Solutions, Imperial Plastics, Landscape Structures, as well as Spectralytics, Tolomatic, and Worth Adams for joining us. Again, appreciate you guys willing to be able to log in online, to be able to leverage and learn from our speaker this afternoon. Okay, so next up, just a brief moment on our agenda. So we will be spending the next hour primarily in two chunks. 2/3 of our time is going to be spent hearing from our speaker this afternoon, Matt Kanz, who's the Director of Continuous Improvement with Jack Link's Beef Jerky. But then we're also going to have another 20 minutes for Q&A. And I know that many of you had responded to our pre-seminar survey with your questions. So we'll start there, but then we'll also allow for time to respond to any questions that come up during the presentation. They typically do. And so if you haven't yet, I want to give you just a moment now to find the chat box and that chat button, because that's the way that you could submit your questions as they come up. And you can send those to me directly. Again, Kirby Sneen. I'm also listed as, I believe, the peer group facilitator in the list of items. So if you send it to everyone or if you send it to me directly, of course, I'll be included in those too. And I'll make sure to comb through those as they come up and then prepare those for the Q&A. And so those are the announcements. On with the show. So again, Matt, I just want to say thank you in front of the online group here for kickstarting these online seminars. Everyone, this is Matt Kanz, the Director of Continuous Improvement with Jack Link's Protein Snacks. So Matt, we are all yours. Take it away.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Looks good, sounds good, and we've got a few thumbs up.
Okay. Hey, thank you very much. Again, interactive session, but we're going to do questions at the end, obviously, the way the format is. But I do appreciate questions. I do like those because part of this session is interaction. And I like questions because I can relate stories to or whatever it may be. But really appreciate you taking the time today. Process improvement is something that I have a passion for personally and professionally. So I've been doing it for about 20 years. I've been with Jack Link's about 9 months. And the journey here at Jack Link's has been very informative. So everything that I kind of have knew and learned about continuous improvement has been kind of turned and tilted. And so a lot of this session will be about recent experiences and some of it will be past experiences. So we'll kind of touch on a couple different things, but one of the reasons why I love process improvement is because processes are built and sustained by people. I know there's a lot of schools of thought out there that say, a bad process will beat a good person. And I somewhat disagree, because processes are really upheld by people. And that's part of the reason why I love process improvement, is because we're interacting and working with people every day. So the center of my day when I arrive is continuous improvement. Being the director of continuous improvement, we operate in 11 different countries all over the world. And so continuous improvement is something that's near and dear to the company and to myself, but we realize at the center of everything, it's people. But as we utilize lean tools and methods to create processes, eventually there's a need to evolve those tools or those processes. And that's where continuous improvement or process improvement comes in. I think a lot of times we have people that have great ideas. They want to implement new processes, and it's really easy to get that uplift. People want to create processes. They want to do the right thing. What we generally see happens, though, those processes need to change and they need to evolve. This is where sometimes the rub comes in, because the rules of engagement, customer orders change, the environment changes. So what we're going through right now, part of the reason why this is an interactive session, the rules of engagement and what worked before and what's going to work now is different. So this is kind of where I'm going to spend most of the time is not necessarily how to create a process, but more when you have a process already in place and you want to adjust or grow the business and change it. That's where we're going to focus on today. So the starting line, one thing that I focus a lot of my time on from a process improvement standpoint is the start line. And what I mean by that is really, where are you now and where is the organization currently? The reason why that's so important is that's where I generally see issues with driving continuous improvement, driving lean, is there's a misguide of where we are, where the organization is, and where we're starting from. So that's the key point, is that we want to look at where are you personally. So from a skill set standpoint, maybe the skills that the organization needs aren't quite in line with where you are now. So you need to take some extra courses, or need to learn a little bit more about the process. That's the other thing that we see from a starting point is, do you really understand the process really, really well? I've seen continuous improvement leaders in our organization where they may not understand the intricacies of the process. And so there's a gap. So when they go to the floor and they try to implement tools that they're really comfortable with, but they don't know the process, the team kind of dodges and doesn't really take on to the new tool because they think the person doesn't know the process really well. The other piece of it is, where is the organization? I've got one slide that I'm going to show twice because it's going to resonate with kind of where you are and where the organization is currently. So understanding where you're starting from is so critical. So we're going to spend a couple slides on that. The other one in the title, math, facts, and data. So that's a term I've been using for several years because it's really about taking the emotion out of decision-making, out of the process. When you focus on math, facts, and data, you're really focusing on the voice of the process, or VOP. It's not about the team member. It's not about the customer. It's about the business. So when we talk about math, facts, and data, we're trying to remove that emotional piece and focus on more, hey, how do we make the business better, and what does good look like from the math, facts, and data standpoint? The next thing that we'll dive into is the identification tools. And so within Lean, Six Sigma, continuous improvement, whatever terms you're most comfortable with, really I like to call them identification tools. And the reason why is, I'll use Jack Links as an example. When we talk about Lean and we talk about Hijunka, Kanban, we don't necessarily use those terms. Those are terms that are near and dear to me, but it's okay. The organization, going back to the starting line, they're not comfortable with those tools yet, and that's okay. So instead of focusing on, kind of where I am, it's where is the organization, and then where do I need to be? So we'll dive into identification tools. And the last one is activities. This is kind of a fun one because for this presentation, I spent several hours thinking about what activities resonate with teammates on the floor. So as I mentioned, when I show up each day, it's not about necessarily my team or myself. It's about the team members that we support on the floor. So when I was putting the presentation together, I thought about what are the most impactful things that I've done with team members on the floor, the activities that I've done within that have driven the most process improvement with them. And so we'll kind of get into that. So the foundation of everything, though, is the starting line. And when I talk about the starting line, I talk about awesome character. So I don't need to tell anybody on the phone, if you're in a change leadership role and you're driving change in the organization, it takes an awesome character, because you're dealing with hero culture, instability, inconsistent performance, lack of identity, product focus. We really need to get these products out. And some of you that are on the call right now, maybe you move past that. Maybe your organization is really mature. Maybe it's kind of moved on to maybe self-discipline. There's financial metrics. The instability still may be there, but you're kind of building out the silos. You have each department set up. You're focused on resources. Do you have enough resources? I need more. But there's still low-hanging fruit. The next piece is the rigor and reliability. So maybe we're looking at process metrics. Maybe there's some stability now. Things are really coming along. Value chain management. You're looking at the whole now. Maybe you've done a couple value stream maps. Maybe we're beyond the tactical day-to-day change management, process improvement. You're looking more at process focus. How do we make the whole organization better? And then my favorite term, islands of excellence. This is generally what I see in a lot of plants, is where you walk through the value stream and you'll see, hey, we have the value stream map. We have all the right things on the board, but they did one cell and they said, hey, this is our model cell. This is where we're going to focus and we're going to build out from that. The question I always ask, is that really the heartbeat of the plant, or is that just the island of excellence and in a sea of waste? So that rigor and reliability is maybe we're there. The next is active engagement. So this is where it's enterprise metrics. We're looking at a bigger picture. It's steady improvement. So that active engagement means, well, now we're stable. We can start to do improvement more steadily. Transparent organization. Sometimes that's hard for different organizations to be really transparent about metrics, margins, kind of where things are at. But then we get into material flow. So back to Hijunka, Kanban. For Jack Links, we're not there from a material flow standpoint. But when I first joined Jack Links, that's what I did. I really looked at internally, where am I from a skill set, but also where is the organization? And some of you on the call, again, when I was with Pentair, I spent several years with Pentair. We were all the way to the right with one of the sites that I had, the servant leadership. It's excellent metrics. It's industry leading. It's customer value focus, the incremental improvement. So this is where, when I talk about team members on the floor, that incremental improvement is sometimes hard, because if you go all the way back to the awesome character and that hero culture, lack of identity, inconsistent performance, you build a lot of heroes in that. When you go all the way to the right, there's that incremental improvement. Maybe you're reducing cycle time by half a second. Whereas when you're showing awesome character and kind of firefighting, you're removing minutes of cycle time. And so when you get to that, the reason why I call it servant leadership is because you have to be restrained. You have to be very constant about what you want to focus on and be very methodical. So the reason why I spend a lot of time on the start line is because if we don't self-recognize where we're at and where the organization is at, there can be misalignment. And when there's misalignment, you start tackling things that either the organization isn't ready for, or it's not something that the business is ready for. So that's where I really call improvement, transformation, and excellence. That's really kind of the roadmap when I look at process improvement, is really understanding where you're starting from. Obviously, improvement, everybody that's on the call today, we want to focus on improvement. And then as we move into transformation, we have to change with the organization, and the organization has to change with us to get to excellence. So math, facts, and data. So again, a term that I use multiple times a day, and it really push it through the organization. The reason why is generally data is a great tool, but it can be used in the wrong way to prove others wrong and to prove that you're right. So when you bump data up against the team, You either validate facts or create facts. And that's why we start with data. Data is kind of the foundation. The facts are really, hey, what can we glean from the data? And one thing we try not to do is use data to prove right or wrong, because when that becomes like a moral thing rather than a fact. So when we talk about facts, really we're bumping it up against perceived truths versus facts. And when we start to scale up or scale down to say, hey, if we grew this business by 30% or 5x, you start to do the math between the data and the facts. Can the process withstand that? Can the process actually be sustainable? Can we actually get to where we need to go with process improvement? So it's the math, facts, and data. You start to create alignment without assumptions. So generally when I hear people talk about, I'm trying to drive change and I can't get people on board, I've got an issue with people listening to me, I always go back to the math, facts, and data, the VOP, the voice of the process. Do you really, as a person, as a leader in the business, do you understand the P&L? Do you understand what drives the business, the economic engine of the business? Because once you understand that, change leadership becomes much easier, because you're removing the emotion piece and you're focused on execution with empathy, not emotion. And the reason why I talk about empathy is change is really personal to people. You have to have empathy if you want to be successful, because as you're going through, when you're empathetical with people on the floor or people in the business, you start to hear them out and understand what are some of the roadblocks that may stop the change. So I'm careful to say empathy and not emotion, because emotion can go up or down. Empathy is consistent. If you're empathetical with people and you show empathy, you're showing that you care, but you're going back to the math, facts, and data. You're not letting emotions control the conversation. One thing we always talk about is common language is currency. So whether reais in Brazil or dollars here or pounds in the UK, wherever you're operating, a common language is currency. And what I mean by that is, let's say I had a business in Wilson, North Carolina that had floor loss. So floor loss in this company was really, really high. So came up with the idea of saying 1 pound of product on the floor equaled $1.73. So $1.73. Basically, I laid a picture of $1.73 with a pile next to it, took a picture of it and hung it all over in the processing area. And what happened is overnight, things started to change, because what happened was the team on the floor realized that, hey, $1.73, that's real money. So everywhere I look around and I see that, it's $1.73. So this team started to take ownership of that, because currency, whatever it is in whichever region you're in, they start to understand that their decisions are real dollars to make sense. And what that comes down to is every day, every decision that they make has an impact on the math, facts, and data of the business, or the voice of the process. When they start thinking that way, they can start to make a bigger and bigger impact. I use the word empower when I kicked it off, because that's part of why I love process improvement. It's empowering the team to make decisions. So when you connect the math, facts, and data to the team on the floor, you're empowering them to make decisions. It's not a top-heavy, heavy-handed decision coming down. It's them having the ability to make the decision to say, that $1.73, well, I saw 3 pounds or 3 piles, that's almost $5. Hey, that's getting up there. I need to make a different decision about what I'm doing with this piece of equipment. So when I talk about math, facts, and data, you say, well, Matt, where do I start? What is math, facts, and data? What is and what isn't? I always start with the customer. And what I mean by that is, what is the customer telling us through the data? And you can look at market share, you can look at sales, you can look at inventory. Where I always go is PQPR, so product quality, product routing. And in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see it's a SKU number, it's the current product or the product type, the annual demand, and the daily demand. The reason why I do that is I want to understand what are the economic engines that are driving each location and the business. The reason why that's important is when someone comes to me and says, Matt, hey, we really need to improve this process. We've got an issue. we need to tackle this, I go back to the PQPR and say, if I make changes on this piece of the business, does it drive the economic engine? And as you can see up there, those first three, I did it on purpose, 4%, 4%, and 11%. So when I look at the annual demand on those three products and someone comes to me and says, hey, Matt, let's focus on this product. My first question is it growing? Well, no, it's a legacy product. It's been here a long time, but we're having problems with it. Well, so it's not growing. It's only 4% of the business. I'm going to play the math, facts, and data card. Why do we want to put energy and focus into that? The reason why I say that is it may be perfectly fine to focus on that. But remember, when you're dealing with change, it can become very emotional. So are you willing to invest that time, your energy, your credibility with the business on 4% of the product or 4% of the volume? I push back. Now, in some cases, there may be small projects that you can do that drive the business. But when I do a PQPR, the product quality, product routing for a plant and a business, I'm going to spend 80% of my energy on what drives the economic engine of the business. So when you talk about where do I pause, I always pause at the P&L. So the PQPR is pretty, it's not subjective, it's detailed. But when you look at the P&L and the voice of the process, now you start to look at margin. So there's other things that play at volume other than just pounds, dollars, or pounds, units. There's dollars involved. So back to that 11%. So we take that 150,000, 11%. That margin may be 500%. So when you look at the P&L and you start to dig in to say, oh, wait a minute, hold on. The data is telling me that the margin on that product's 500%. Well, at 150,000 a year, oh, wait a minute, it is the economic engine of the business. And oh, by the way, it's our top customer. So when you know your top customer, your top margin product, and you go to the floor where you have the most impact, now you're working with the team and you're arming them with decision points. So when you go to the floor and you say, hey, cell number 7, I just want to congratulate you guys. Well, what do you mean? Well, you make this product 69, and it's the top grossing SKU from a margin standpoint that we make. Way to go, guys. And you're going to get a lot of puzzled looks and say, well, wait a minute, you know what? I didn't know that. Okay. Well, now you've just empowered them. So you say, hey guys, listen, we need to understand this process better. We need to make improvements on the cycle time. Are you guys with me? Oh yeah, let's do this. Because ultimately, as leaders on the floor, if we want to have an impact, the best, quickest impact is on the Gemba. But before you go to the Gemba, you've got the math, facts, and data of the PQPR. You understand your products. So back to the analogy that I used, hey, know where you are from a skill set, but also know where the business is. Well, now you have all those things. You know what your skills are. You know where the business is. And when you go to the floor, you can have a big impact. How much resistance are you going to receive from the team members on the floor when you tell them that you're helping them grow the business because they're the highest margin, highest impact cell? You're going to have little to no resistance. So when we talk about, hey, now we've got the team on our side, we've got the data, we've got the metrics, we've got the voice of the process, we've got the math, facts, and data. What do we do from an identification standpoint? My favorite identification tool is Stand in the Circle. It's an old school tool that's been around forever. I think it's probably one of the most underutilized tools that we have in manufacturing today. The reason why I say that is I was on the phone earlier this morning with a med device mechanical engineer. Him and I go way back, and he said, you know what, I would say, venture to say 90% of the time of the MEs is spent at their desk and 10% is on the floor. And I asked him, I said, well, wait a minute. I thought that, with this coronavirus and everything else going on, the people that support the production floor were allowed to come to work, and the people that aren't were staying home. He said, oh yeah, the MEs support the floor. And I said, well, how do you support the floor when 90% of your time is at the desk? So when we talk about identification tools, you can do, we'll talk about mapping in a second, but Stand in Circle So back to that cell that's driving 500% margins, 150,000 pieces per year. I'm going to go stand in that cell and I'm just going to talk to the team. And then I'm going to stand there and not say anything to them to see what do I observe? And then you start asking clarifying questions. The next thing is the dashboard, the MDI. So the Manufacturers Alliance puts on great sessions on MDI. So I won't go deep into detail, but really what that be present daily is going back to the cell daily. So we do the stand in circle, we get some generalities of what we think is going on. What the dashboard and the MDI is going back the next day and looking at what was performance the previous day, what went wrong, what went right, and interacting with the team to understand, hey, what did go well, what didn't go well. You start to build a foundation for what are some of the problems that we need to focus on to drive improvement. But two of the key ingredients that we just talked about is being on the floor and being present. So when you're on the floor, when you're with the team, the speed to solution becomes so much quicker. And then the value stream mapping. And again, this tool is the third tool for a reason, because when I look at stand in the circle and when I look at dashboards, those are all things that you don't need extensive training on. You can implement immediately. When I talk about value stream mapping, and we'll go back into the start line again, I'm going to pull that slide up. Value stream mapping is a higher level tool that gets used for a lot of things that it should not be used for. And the reason why I say that is if you do the first two and you start picking off small events at a time, your mapping becomes cleaner. What I generally see with value stream maps are two things. They're way too busy. There's all of these identified issues on it that are all different levels of identification. You know, I don't have a floor mat. You know, we have an ergonomic issue in this cell because we don't have a floor mat. All the way to our delivery out of this cell is less than 27%. All things equal, if you go stand in the circle, you're probably going to get a floor mat within an hour. We're going to fix that. Those are the kinds of things that shouldn't end up on a value stream map. So when we go back to this, I want to come back to it. Where am I and where are we? Generally when I go to a floor, I have the math facts data, been to the floor, and now I go back and really reflect. And what I mean by reflect is actually go back to the office and think about it. What did I see when I went to the floor? Did I see a hero culture? You know, are people running around doing all different kinds of things, trying to be the hero? Do I see a lot of low-hanging fruit, literally and figuratively? It's a way to spot check and say, where are we from a business and where am I? Enterprise metrics. So a lot of times I'll see OTD, like on-time delivery, and it'll be posted in a cell, but the OTD is for the whole company. So I'll ask a team member in the cell, hey, how's your OTD? Well, I'm not sure, but it's posted up there. It's 93%. Did you run yesterday? Well, no, I didn't run. So that metrics everybody. It's an enterprise wide. So now the team member in that area doesn't even know where they fit and why they matter. But someone will be quick to brag, hey, we post, OTD and metrics in the cell. It's an enterprise metric, so the team members know where they are. Disagree with that. Industry leading. So again, we have industry leading products that are out there. We have some great manufacturers that are on the call today that have industry leading products. But those alone, when you look at the highlighted pieces, generally when I go into a site, even our sites, this is what I see. I see a little bit of a hero culture. I see a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's islands of excellence. Hey, we had a lean program. They did 5S. They did Hijunka. They did standard work. We have Kanban, but it's in one piece of the plant. And then I see enterprise metrics. They're posted everywhere. Hey, how did the business do last quarter? Well, we were 95% delivery, but no one knows how they fit into that. The key is just to understand where to start from. When we talk about activities, so I'm not a weightlifter, I'm not a bodybuilder, but I'd venture to say, I think I saw Steve online. He had equipment in his background, a home gym. I love that. That's great because I like to work out. When I think about a top story, so one thing I talked to Kirby about this yesterday. What is a top story? A top story is a just do it. And so you say, well, why do you call it a top story? Because when I think about just do it's things that the team can do automatically. We don't need a ton of validation. We've got some math, facts, and data. We don't need a large group to do it, but it shows awesome character. So when you're in that awesome character mode, a top story starts to build the muscle memory. Hey guys, I'm going to give you the math, facts, and data. I'm going to show you where you fit and why you matter into the business. And I want you to start making little improvements. Can you get that floor mat? I'm going to go back to that floor mat for a second. The reason why I bring that up is the mechanical engineer that I was talking to this morning, they have a little postcard where people can turn in ideas for improvement. And those vary all over different companies, but one of them that he was talking about was, I need a floor mat. That was the continuous improvement idea, which is fine. I'm not saying that isn't or isn't, but how empowering would it be is if you go stand in the circle, you identify with the team that they need a floor mat, and you ask that team member, hey, can we leave the cell and go get a floor mat? And they go get it right then and there. We put it in place and it's done. You're starting to build that muscle memory, that empowerment of the team that they can make changes. Go up one more layer, and a Kaizen event. So this is the workout routine. So we talked about muscle memory. Hey, I'm going to do some curls. I'm going to, do a little light lifting. The workout routine is the 5-day event. What I generally see with value stream mapping events is everybody wants to do a Kaizen event. Let's do an event. Let's get a full team together. Let's do 5 days or 4 days. One concern I have with that is you start to make things an event. Now, if it's a major change and you're making big improvements to the business, maybe you're in this servant leadership, that's perfectly fine. But I think, again, it goes back to be honest with where you are in this journey. A Kaizen event is for active engagement, servant leader. When you're talking about awesome character, let's focus on the top stories. Let's get the muscle memory, because when you do a Kaizen event, you're dealing with more empowered team members that can make changes. And the last one is the project. This is an A3. This is kind of the training plan now. Hey, I'm going to be a bodybuilder in a year. We're going to start to build that plan out. And again, what I see on value stream maps is we've identified 8 projects, 8 A3s, and we're going to get them all done by summer. You're not setting up the team for success. Again, project overload, too many things going on. Again, I would go back to, where are you from a start line? Where do you fit in this improvement, transformation, and excellence? Make sure you understand where you are in the journey. And what does process improvement look like? So I want to talk about this just for a few minutes. This is where it can be. So I mentioned Pentair. I was with Pentair for a little over 4 years, almost 5 years. And one of our sites was a visioning site. And what that meant was we had people coming from all over touring the site to see what were we doing for continuous improvement and lean. And this was our journey. So we would start with the current state map. We had a future state map, and then we had a site transformation plan. And within that site transformation plan, there was the top stories, or the just do it's. There was Kaizen events, and then there was projects, and there was project A3s. So we had all that bubbled inside there, but we were extremely far down the path. It took literally 4 years to get there. We focused generally on that servant leadership, active engagement, and we'd bounce between those two. So when you talk about enterprise metrics, industry leading, customer focus, every event that we did had a charter. So the charter was really, here's what we're going to focus on, here's the metrics that we're going to drive, and I apologize for the eye chart there, but we would choose the metrics based on the math, facts, and data, what should look good at 30, 60, 90 days. And again, many of you on the call may be used to that. That's something that we normally do. But part of the process improvement is you'll bounce between that awesome character, self-discipline. Sometimes you'll be at servant leadership, but know where your plant is or your organization. And then when you look to the left, the execution of the improvement event, it's a celebration piece. Remember, at the end of the day, process improvement is about people, and people need to be recognized. I think a lot of times improvements become about, hey, where's the data? Where's the money? Drive improvement. We need to focus on saving money. We need to cut costs. I understand all that. You can do that. It's a yes, but yes, continuous improvement can be the cost savings, save $10 million a year. But at the end of the day, the processes that you put in place to save dollars and cents are surrounded by people. They're the ones that sustain it. But when you do that right, the scorecard and the metrics read out. So the last box on the left is really understanding what are the math, facts, and data, the voice of the process. How does all this fit into driving metrics? And I was talking to one of my team members that works for me, and we were talking about customer service. And he said, we're doing a customer service event. And I said, well, what's the standards for orders input per hour? And he said, well, we don't have one. I said, are we overloaded there? He said, no, but it's a convoluted, kind of a messy process. I said, so we don't have a measurement. We don't know how it'll impact the business. We don't know if they're overloaded. Where's that going to read out in the scorecard? And he couldn't answer it. And I didn't paint him into a corner on purpose, but at the end of the day, why we do process improvement, why do we focus on math, facts, and data is because it needs to read out in the P&L and in the scorecard. The customer has to feel a difference. And you say, well, it's not all about the P&L or the scorecard, but ultimately the customer has to feel it. And if the customer feels like we've impacted them in a positive way, they'll buy more products from us. They'll do more business with us. Our margins will grow because we're getting better at what we do, and our volume will go up. The beautiful part about that is now we've got to do a new current state map because of all the changes that we've made. We've got to remap. So in this actual piece here, we would map every year. So once a year, we would drive enough change in the business to say, we need to map again. The reason why I say this to last is we'll find a lot of people will talk about this is the standard. You should follow this standard for process improvement. The challenge back I go to is this. Where are you in this process? Where is the business in that process? And it's not about being good, bad, right, or wrong. It's more about self-realization of where the business is. And I'll use one more topic. When I joined Jack Links, everybody wanted me to kind of drive this type of process improvement. Hey, let's have a current state map, future state map, site transformation. Really hit the pause button and said, let's find out where all the sites are. And what I found out is a lot of sites were back at awesome character, hero culture, firefighting, a lot of issues. And so what we've done is really focused on how do we build that muscle memory with the top story, the just do it's. Let's drive some simple things in the business so we can start to work up to a Kaizen event. So I have some sites that haven't done a Kaizen event yet this year. And you'd say, well, wow, you as a director of continuous improvement, you should be driving more events. How many events a year are you having? I don't measure that because ultimately the goal is I want to drive the metrics in the scorecard and the business so the customer feels a difference. So I like to end with this slide because when we talk about a path, when you do process improvement, you do continuous improvement, you're a lean leader, you're a director of continuous improvement, you have two choices. This well-beaten path on the left, and you can say that's the easy path. It's clear, it's easy. I've got all these tools, and if I work hard enough and I take these tools, I'm going to drive down that path, and we're going to take the organization to newer heights and newer links. Then you have the path on the right. You can't see which way kind of the path ends up, but I always look at the right and say, what have we tried? What has the organization tried in the path? I'm not saying that's the right way, but it seems like some people went down that path and maybe it worked. So what I always like to do is just pause. Where is the organization? Where am I? Before you choose a path and just say, well, it worked here. I'm going to cookie cutter and do it here. And then I'm going to do it again. Generally, the team doesn't always go with you down that path. You've got to understand where you are, where you're starting from before you pick that path. And with that, I will turn it over to Kirby and our moderator for questions.
Thank you, Matt. That that was an awesome presentation. I appreciate you sharing your insight and your experiences. I have got a lot of notes. I am always learning, and I know our attendees are too, as everyone showed up. And we had a few questions come in throughout. I had a hard time not interrupting you, to be honest, because there was a couple here that were kind of definition based. And I know sometimes people can get hung up on a definition, therefore lose out on some of the great stories. So quick one for you then. Define P&L.
Oh, excellent question. So profit and loss. And one thing I like to preface that with is when I talk about a P&L, every organization that I've been with has been different. And what I mean by that, I've seen Excel-based P&Ls. I've seen the dot matrix printer P&Ls. But when I talk about that, it's variable spend, it's fixed cost, it's material cost, conversion cost, whatever you'd like to call it. But ultimately, when I look at a P&L or a profit and loss statement, it's understanding the whole business. The reason why I don't call it just like variable spend is because you need to understand the margin structure of the products. So like the products that are behind me, each one of those products has a different margin. So it does cost different levels to make it, different materials, but I want to understand the profit and the loss of the product, not just the cost.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Definitely something to pay attention to. And I know not every company shares as much information, but the more you can get, the better, it sounds like in this scenario. Where's the revenue coming in? Where are the investments being made? And then what's the difference? Because you got to be able to fund the future. And in order to do that, you got to understand where those funds are coming from.
I want to preface that too. So I've worked in private companies and public companies. So Jack Links is a private family-owned business. They're very guarded with their financials. So literally the first day that I was here, I was sitting in the CFO's office and I said, what can I share? What can I do? I need to know the rules of engagement. What can I not share? And he was very clear. He said, why do you want to know? And I said, well, part of it is I want to drive continuous improvement. So, but I walk through kind of the thought process between the PQPR, the product quality, product routing. And he said, you can share pretty much everything except the profitability of the overall company. We really don't want to share that because we're a privately held company. So you need to know the rules because some companies will not share financials, but they will share some of them. And I think if you're forthright and say, this is what I'm using it for, this is who I'm going to share it with, they'll be willing to do that.
Thank you. So then moving right along to the next question here, because we had a handful. What about individuals that are sometimes feeling the tendency to resolve problems on the fly? Therefore, they're doing what feels right, and they're not taking the time to collect the math, facts, and data. What kind of advice would you have for someone that's got that pressure to be able to respond to a problem quickly and on the fly when they'd rather slow down?
I'll answer it two ways. So the business that I'm in now, we have a lot of people that have been here a long time. So we have family members that work in the business that just know the business really well. So you can imagine me coming in and trying to transform something that they've been doing since 1985. There's obviously a lot of tension when it comes to that. But the thing that I generally do is let them make decisions. But then when it's a safe moment, when it's quiet, when we're not stressed, we go back and we not call it Monday morning quarterback, but I call it a postmortem. So we talk about the decision. The reason why that's important is you understand their thought process and you start to teach them where is the business? Where are they in the business? Because back to that self-realization, sometimes people are so wrapped up in the day-to-day, they can't see the forest through the trees, as the old saying is. But when you start asking clarifying questions, it helps. The second piece that I'll ask is when someone puts me on the spot and they're like, Matt, we need a decision right now, the first thing I always go to is delegate. So I always say, okay, well, who's the best person to answer this? Well, it's you. Okay. The next thing is delay. I'm not gonna be put on the spot because generally if someone needs a decision that quick, there's more to the story than that. They want to move on, or They kind of want to do something else. So if I can't delegate and I can't delay, then I'll make a decision. So I'm okay with making decisions on the spot, but I always remember those 3 Ds: delegate, delay, or decide.
That's really good stuff. I think, and that's an easy way to remember it too. When you're in the heat of the moment, you're feeling the pressure, you just remember those 3 Ds.
I always kind of laugh when someone comes, because I have this happen, once a week. Someone will come in, Matt, we need a decision right now. This is extremely important. I'm like, whoa, hey, where did this come from? I always want to know where it came from, because knowing the source of a decision like that will tell you a lot about what's going on in the business. Again, it's that self-realization. Where are we right now? How did it get this bad that you need a decision right now?
Right. Yeah. We got a fire. Put this out.
Yeah.
This next question is kind of a cousin to that last question, where this individual's running into attempts to capture tracking and trending results that are cumbersome and time consuming. So it's not like there's the pressure to just make the decision now based on emotion or on the fly. We realize, hey, we want to use math, facts, and data, but man, getting it just seems like it's a pain, and we don't have the system set up. So sometimes we're neglecting those things and we just go back to our gut and more emotion. Have you ever been in that scenario, and do you have any advice for this individual?
Yeah, I tell you, I'll share a story. I won't say which location, but it was one of our plants. I was sitting in there probably the first 6 weeks I was with the company, and we had an issue. And I said, wow, guys, this is a big deal. We need to collect some data. And they're like, whoa, Matt, we got data. And I'm like, really? And they're like, we got 38,000 lines of data. And I was like, well, what have you done with it? They're like, we're too busy. We haven't done anything with it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I about fell out of my chair, because that's a real world situation where I think people look at data as a security blanket. It's going to be so obvious that it's not a risk to make a decision. So when I look at data, I'm looking at, what do I collect just enough to run an experiment? And the reason why I say that is, take a person on the floor. If they collect 100 lines of data and they're getting 10 lines an hour, at the end of that shift, I'm going to say, what do you guys want to try tomorrow that's different than what you did today? Well, what do you mean? You've collected enough data that we can make a hypothesis and we can try something. I think what happens is people are afraid to take risks. And that's where I'm not saying that you shouldn't collect a lot of data. What I'm saying is, it's in proportion of the risk. Make sure you realize that, are you just trying to create a security blanket so there's less risk, or are you collecting enough data that you're actually going to drive sustainable change? And so we run experiments all the time in our plants, little experiments, because we'll collect 10 or 20 points of data, and then we try something. It doesn't work, but guess what? We don't measure it anymore. If it didn't work and the data didn't help us, why collect it for a month?
Right. All right. I'm sure that's helpful for that individual. We've got another one that kind of tied into, I think, your experience sitting down with, I believe it was the CFO at Jack Links when you first started there. This individual, it sounds like they come from a company that regularly brings people together from different departments. It's a good practice. They've said it's been fantastic. But in that process of bringing people together, there's heightened emotions, specifically related to all the experiences related to this team coming together for decades, literally decades. And this is the way it's always been done. And so what would you do, or what would you recommend for a team that gets together, but they've got decades of experience and lots of emotion? How do you help them be more cohesive and more disciplined in how they're collecting data?
Yeah, so I'm not a huge football fan, but you probably heard defenses win championships. Those blockers, those linemen, they help win championships. They don't create progress all the time. So when you have blockers of change, blockers of progress, generally my advice and what I normally do is I always try to limit the scope of who's involved. So if you say, hey, we're gonna build a new cell, we're gonna run a new product, I'll go to the CFO, I'll go to whoever and say, who needs to be involved in the decision? Because what happens is that scope of who's involved, we want to make sure we limit that, because there's a lot of people that have opinions. And I used to be of the mind frame, the more minds, the better. That can be, but that hinders progress, because if everyone's opinion isn't equal and all data is not equal, because you can collect internal data that the customer never feels. So you got to be careful. So aligning who's going to be involved in the decision. It's not necessarily who gets a yay or a nay, but who's going to be involved in the decision. So if you deal in an organization that likes to bring a lot of team members together, make a list of who's going to be involved and what are the metrics that you're looking to impact, and stop there. Don't plug and play people, like bring people in and out, because every time someone new comes in, they'll say, hey, this organization's all about inclusion. I should get a vote on this. I understand that, but when we started down the path, we need to limit the number and the data that we're focusing on so we can drive progress.
Yeah, managing that scope, managing involvement to make sure it's appropriate for whatever the task at hand is.
Yep.
So we've got just a couple more here. Before we get into it, I've got to share, because we had some interest expressed in the chat. The Manufacturers Alliance does have our Lean Practitioner certification, as well as our Supervision Fundamental certification that is being turned into an online offering. And so that is going to be available near mid-April. Those sessions will be available to take online in mid-April. And then registration is going to open up next week. So if you want to gain the credentials and the experience in leadership and problem solving, take a look at those two programs, as they're not going to be offered online. Okay, so this next question seems like it's pretty targeted. This individual wants to get to a true pacing tact, and they're in a build to order environment where every day is different. So they know it's possible, but they're looking for some guidance on getting the math, facts, and data to use to help them get there. So, you know, I first look at this and I go, well, there's assumption that there's a true pacing tact, and we know that we got to get there. So what's your initial reaction to this particular question? Getting to that true pacing tact in that build to order environment, every day is different.
So the PQPR, there's that thing, it serves a couple different purposes. I didn't show the whole one because that was an actual PQPR from our business, but that's the basis for creating tact time for all our products. Because what it turns into is a cyclic schedule or a level scheduling in an environment where it's make to order. So the Pentair plant that I had, one of the plants in Milwaukee, was a make to order business. We had 13,000 SKUs. A configurator in JDE basically created the orders. So a customer could come in, they could plug and play all the pieces, and we'd have to make it in a 5-day lead time. So sales order, we had to build it in 3 days, and we had to ship it on the 4th day and get it to the customer on the 5th day. So looking at perfect order index, 13,000 SKUs, 5,200 different parts. So what we did was we spent 4 years, and back to that example, that second to last slide that I showed, we followed that process for 4 years, round and round, from a current state, future state, transformation plan, execution of events. What we created was sub-assemblies. So we took all that complexity and we boiled it down to base level sub-assemblies, and we created that cyclic schedule of the sub-assemblies. So I know it's just like one plant. I was doing a value stream mapping at one of our sites, and the plant manager said, this business is so complex that we don't know what to do. When we did the PQPR and we listed every SKU out, and the other thing that I don't know if you saw that off to the side, we list every SKU and then we list every process across the top. And then we put an X in there which processes it touches. So you look at sub-assembly and then you look at which processes are in common. So it's an old method, but what it teaches you is which processes are your bottlenecks potentially, or where you need to focus on improving the process. And then on the left-hand column, it's showing what are all the SKUs that you run over and over again? Because even though it may sound like a complex business with multiple SKUs, there's some either commonality in the SKU and the type of configuration, or there's commonality in the process. There's probably one or two processes that every single product runs through. That's probably where you need to go look at from a, hey, this is our pacemaker that we need to go look at.
Yeah, and so using that PQPR tool as really that guide.
Yes, because ultimately what you're doing is you're looking at the structure of your plant from a process standpoint, and then you're looking at the SKUs, because the customer is speaking to you through the SKUs.
Yeah.
How you build it, they really don't care, but that's where the process improvement comes in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see here. So we got time for one more. So I'm going to take a closer look at my notes here. This person says sometimes it's difficult to compile life test data collected over a period of time in a way that clearly shows product quality. So this sounds like kind of a specific application with life test data. So any guidance or reaction on how to clearly show product capability?
Well, one thing I always lean to right away is what are the government regulations? So I deal with the food industry. I always say, what does the government tell us that we need to do? The USDA, FDA, whatever it may be. And then really, what is the industry standard? So if we're making a shelf-stable product, there's certain rules that we need to understand on that. And then there's industry rules. And then there's obviously, what are our rules, or HACCP plan, or what we need to follow. But always start with the highest level of kind of that barrier to get in there. It would be the government. What does the government require? I think when you start to get into the plant level, that's another opportunity to have that conversation with the team members and educate them on the math, facts, and data, and show them more and more about the industry. They won't have time to get into it, but many times when you share regulations or you share product data with the team member, they have insight into problems that have been experienced or that have happened, and they can help you fix those things. It's amazing how much knowledge is on the floor, and that's why I go back to the stand and circle. It's one of the simplest lean tools, but again, I was using the ME example. He literally told me today, this is a top company in Minneapolis, 90% of the time they spend at the desk. That's really hard to support the team and the products when you're at a desk.
Right. Well, and so that's it. That wraps up all the questions that we've received, and we're doing great on time here. In Traditional Manufacturers Alliance, we've started on time and we're going to end on time. So, Matt, with that, just thank you so much for all the prep work that you put into sharing via the presentation, and be able to answer all these questions on the spot here. I know we've got a lot of applause emojis and thank yous going through in the chat here. So I know everybody appreciates it, as we had 100% of the attendees be able to log in. So that's awesome to see the engagement there. So with that, again, we'll wrap up. And then for those of you still listening here, as you begin to log off, save the date. We're going to come at you again next Friday for an online seminar where Matt is presenting again. So Matt Kanz, Director of Continuous Improvement, next Friday we're looking at. And so hopefully you can join us again, broadcasting at 4:30. Talking about leadership standard work and strategies to build.
Yes.
It's going to be fun.
Thank you, Kirby. I appreciate it. Thank you for everyone for participating. I really appreciate you and the Alliance. Thank you for having me.
Hey, we love what you're doing, and let's do more of it together.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. That was good.